Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. The Liberal Party of Canada is keeping a Mi'kmaq candidate on the ballot despite offensive comments he posted on social media years ago. Jaime Batiste is the Liberal candidate for the Nova Scotia riding of Sydney, Victoria. Over the weekend, the Toronto Sun exposed sexist, racist, and homophobic comments he made dating back to 2011, including that he thinks thin Indigenous women are on meth or pills. Batiste has since apologized for the comments and deleted them. The Eskasoni First Nation resident served on the National Youth Council of the Assembly of First Nations and is currently the lead for treaty education in Nova Scotia. The Conservatives have called on Trudeau to remove Batiste, saying the comments were, quote, disgusting and inexcusable. On Sunday, Trudeau stood by Batiste, saying he has taken responsibility for those actions and apologized. Well, with just 2 weeks to go until voting day, some political experts suggest today could be the most pivotal day yet of this election campaign. Tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 federal leaders will take to the stage in Gatineau, Quebec for the first commissioned English language debate. From the beginning of this race, the polls have been largely stagnant, with the Tories and the Liberals duking it out at the top. Today's CTV News Globe and Mail Nanos poll has the Liberals dropping nearly 2.5 points to sit at a 34.3% support, while the Conservatives come in at 33.4%. The New Democrats are unchanged at 15% support, while the Greens round out the top 4 at 9.6%. APTN will bring you full coverage of the leaders' debate right after this newscast. So last week we reported on 2 sisters from Surrey, BC that went missing. The girls, who are 10 and 13 years old, were located over the weekend and placed into foster care. Today, RCMP and BC have confirmed that they are looking for the 2 sisters again. Laws on identifying the children are preventing us from naming them. To Alberta, Bear Paw Media has produced an educational video to warn youth about the dangers of driving while impaired. The 12-minute video features live action and animation combined with humor to show how drinking alcohol or taking drugs impacts your ability to drive. It outlines the penalties for getting caught while driving and impaired. The video, called DUI FYI, is available free to educators.
The message of the video is to educate Indigenous youth and new drivers on the legislation so that they make safe decisions and so they're not driving impaired.
Is already feeling climate change. In the Northwest Territory, that means eroding shorelines. The Yukon is dealing with thawing permafrost. In Nunavut, climate change has opened up the Northwest Passage to more ships than ever before. And along the Northwest Passage, that has resulted in economic activity. But at what cost? Our Kent Driscoll went to Pond Inlet, Nunavut, to find out.
Pond Inlet, Nunavut bills itself as the jewel of the Eastern Arctic. Just look around. The community of 1,700 fits the bill. That's why 18 different times this summer, this scene unfolds. A ship shows up. A group of mostly white, mostly European visitors in matching outfits hit the shore and make their way up the hill. Like an army, but slower and with cameras. The government of Nunavut estimates that 3,600 people will visit Pond Inlet via cruise ship this summer, double the town's population. That number of visitors goes up every year with the Northwest Passage opening up. There were only 13 cruise ship visits in 2017. Inuit and Pond Inlet see both sides of the opportunity. It creates some work, but what's the cost?
Overall, I think it's not good for the community, not good for the ocean. It may be good for a few people who are selling crafts and doing some theater group.
I see it more as a positive thing. It kind of helps the local economy, and a lot of artists that like to homemade, handmade stuff.
I'm happy for the tourism community, but it's sad on the animals because they're so disruptive, especially in the Bay Area where the narwhals are unrest and other whales as well. Plus, there was hardly any seals this summer, so it's probably, I'm not sure if it's from the cruise ships always being here, because we have so much ships this year, both from cruise ships and from Baffinland, that it's kind of hard to say what's causing it.
The lack of seals is very different for Pond Inlet. Usually this time of year, there would be sealskins drying outdoors all over the community. Once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it. There's no sealskins anywhere. It would be like walking in a major Canadian city and not seeing a pigeon. It isn't just the cruise ships, but they play a part. This is Bylot Island, separated from Pond Inlet by the Eclipse Sound. To the west of here, the Mary River iron ore mine. Last year, 71 ships loaded with iron ore so pure you don't have to smelt it sailed past Pond Inlet. Combined with the 18 cruise ships, that's a lot of traffic. Residents suggest that whales and seals are being driven to the other side of Bylot Island, making hunting more difficult.
Narwhals are, around here, but they go to the other side of the island now.
It's good about that. We can get more money.
And that?
They meet the narwhal run away.
The visitors do get to experience authentic Inuit culture. During their few hours on shore, they get to see this show, explaining why and how Inuit do what they do. And they do contribute to the economy. This hall wasn't free, these performers were paid, and some art was sold. They've seen the change in the climate themselves here. Outside the local co-op on a Sunday afternoon, almost every person we talk with agrees. Things are changing in Pond Inlet.
The summers are longer, the winters are a little shorter, and I noticed that it would heavily rain in December, but it's coming later on. So like the patterns of the weathers have changed, and that's what I have noticed.
It's a lot warmer these days, and the spring starts earlier, and the fall is longer now.
Summer seems to be getting warmer and lasting a little longer than usual since my childhood days, yeah.
Like most of Nunavut's challenges, there isn't just one answer. Economic growth can hurt the environment. But Pond Inlet residents can't pretend climate change isn't happening. That change is here. And as usual, Inuit are being forced to figure out, on the fly, how to handle a problem they didn't create. One thing is certain. Inuit can adapt. They've done it before, and it looks like they'll keep having to. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Pond Inlet, Nunavut.
We've got to take a quick break, but first here's tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east coast, we've got 16 in cloud in St. John, 17 in rain in Halifax. Kuujjuaq is 9 in rain, 11 in Inukjuak and cloudy. 15 for Val-d'Or, 17 in sunshine in Montreal. Toronto is 18 in sunny. Ottawa, 17 in sunshine. Sault Ste. Marie, 17 in sunny. 17 in sunny for Big Trout Lake. 16 in Sioux Lookout. 16 in Kapuskasing, sunshine there. 10 with a mix of sun and cloud in Thompson. 15 in rain in God's Lake. 20 for Gimli and Winnipeg. 18 in sunny for Brandon. 18 in rain in Swift Current. 12 in cloud in Yorkton. 1 with a mix of sun and cloud in Buffalo Narrows. 3 with a mix of sun and cloud in La Ronge. Welcome back. Indigenous families in British Columbia are sharing their vision for changing the child welfare system in that province. Indigenous children in BC are 15 times more likely than non-Indigenous children to be put in government care. West Coast Leaf, in partnership with Families and Elders, recently released a report called Pathways in a Forest, Indigenous Guidance on Prevention-Based Child Welfare. Dennis Ward spoke earlier with Elba Bendo, a director at West Coast Leaf.
Elba, thanks so much for joining us. The report says what many families and advocates have been saying for decades, that there is an urgent need to shift the child welfare system from being apprehension-based to prevention-based. What are some of the ways this can be achieved?
Well, what we heard from the families that participated in our project is that Indigenous approaches, localized community-based supports, and Indigenous communities and nations having full authority of child welfare is what works for families, it's what keeps communities together, and it's what keeps children out of care. So the best way to shift the child welfare system is really to work in a concerted way to shift full authority to Indigenous nations and communities over child welfare, and to fully fund localized prevention-based programs and supports.
Well, you mentioned the families, and the report does give voice to 64 caregivers who share their stories of fighting to keep their children out of care. How important was it to give a voice to those who often have to remain silent for legal and other reasons?
In our report, it was essential to give voice to, well, not to give voice, to have the voices of these families form a significant part of the report and the recommendations. It was a question that we thought through quite a bit as an organization that is predominantly made up of settlers. What is our role here? And we identified that role as amplifying the advocacy that families do on a daily basis and the advocacy that Indigenous leaders have done on a daily basis. And having the families lead the, from what should be included in this report to what the recommendation should look like, really, I think, has impacted how this report reads. It's also impacted how clearly and concisely we can see a pathway forward that is different from what is currently in practice. So I would say it was essential to have families participate, but also to be the decision makers in what was included in this report and what recommendations were made.
The report does have many recommendations that include systemic reforms, financial supports, and advocacy. Could you speak to some of those?
Sure, yeah. We make broad recommendations to the provincial government. Some of those, many of those have to do with pathways towards self-determination and how that can happen in the child welfare system, not only for families that are living on reserve, but for all families and children who are Indigenous, who are living in rural and urban areas across BC. And that those recommendations are aimed at ensuring that there's full authority that's transferred to Indigenous communities and nations. We also make recommendations with regard to an accountable funding system. While there's funding out there for these types of community-based supports, they're life-saving supports, that funding is very patchy, and we feel that a legal framework for providing that funding, the same way that that funding is provided for hospitals and schools, should be provided to nations and communities, and that should be built into legislation. We also recommend legislative amendments that are more reflective of the ways of the Indigenous approaches to child welfare, including what is in the best interest of the child. And we recommend that the BC government assess how siloed ministerial roles are undermining the ability to provide wraparound, holistic, and relationship-centered services to Indigenous families.
But the report is specific to British Columbia, but do you feel these recommendations could improve child welfare systems across the country?
It's a difficult question to answer because Indigenous communities across Turtle Island and what is known as Canada as well are incredibly varied. Their experiences with colonialism, relationship to land, and the child welfare system are also varied. But this report is just one of many reports, including the TRC report, the recent report of the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, who call for recommendations supporting self-determination and supporting accountability and consistency in funding. So I think there are definitely elements of this report that can impact responses nationwide, but they need to vary based on each community and what the community needs and the community wants. And that community participation should lead the way for amendments.
Elba, we'll have to leave it there, but an important report. Thanks for your work on it, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
Time for another break. When we come back, we meet a U.S. national swimmer reconnecting with his Saskatchewan roots after being 60s scooped. And here's the rest of tomorrow's weather. To northern Alberta, we've got 1 in mix of sun and cloud for Fort McMurray and Peace River. 1 and a mix of sun and cloud in Edmonton, -2 and snow in Calgary. 10 and cloud in Penticton, 16 and cloud in Victoria. 2 and mostly sunny up in Fort Nelson and Prince George, 10 and sunny in Prince Rupert. -1 for Mayo and Dawson City with some flurries, -1 and mostly sunny in Rock River. 2 in Norman Wells and sunshine, 0 for Yellowknife and Wati. Inuvik is 1 and sunny, Tuck is 0 and sunny, 0 in Paulatuck. 2 in snow in Baker Lake, 1 and mix of sun and cloud in Repulse Bay. 5 in mix of sun and cloud in Pangertown, 4 and rain in Cape Dorset, and -4 and snow in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. While Big Pharma is in the news settling multi-million-dollar class action lawsuits for the harm their drugs have caused, a group of traditional medicine pickers from around Manitoba and northwestern Ontario gathered in Winnipeg at harvest time to share their knowledge and medicines from back home. I had the privilege of joining the group. Here's a look inside their medicine cabinets.
I came for this. This was sage. We don't have this up north. So that's what I was looking for, and I got lots today, and I'm happy for that.
Dion Dick traveled 400 kilometers from Grand Rapids to Winnipeg for the first annual medicine exchange. While he was thrilled with the sage, others from the south were just as happy for what he brought from his medicine chest.
This is horsetail. It's good for diabetes. This one is red baneberry root.
And you brought that?
I brought that. The elder that told me the story about this is for colon cancer. It's mainly for men. But it can be used for women as well.
Other medicines included bergamot, seneca and lily pad roots, and yarrow. The exchange was the brainchild of Angie Cody and Carrie Sinclair.
Well, we were learning about medicines for a few years, and this year we were traveling all over Manitoba this summer picking medicines, and it was we just started sharing, and a teaching that I got from an elder from up north, he said that on this island they have this medicine wheel, and it's very sacred there, and he said, but when they would go check it out, they find medicines or they find things and items that aren't traditionally from the area, like shells and other things. And they said because their people used to travel all over and trade medicines, have a medicine exchange. So we started talking and said, why don't we do it?
A few dozen people shared medicines and recipes to combine certain plants to treat certain ailments and prevent other ones.
And the reason why I do this is for this generation. So this is my son's daughter, and I taught my son a little bit, but she's younger, she's a baby, but she's going to learn a lot. She's going to come out with me and do all sorts of things. Yeah. And that's what we need to do with our kids nowadays, is take them out into the bush and get them thinking about natural ways of healing and not depending so much on the Western medicines and getting back to nature.
They hope next year's exchange will be even bigger and plan to apply for grants to bring medicine keepers from even more territories to share their healing plants and knowledge. Melissa Ridgen, APTN National News, Winnipeg. For years, he represented the United States as a long-distance swimmer, but Wayne Snellgrove's roots actually started in Saskatchewan. Snellgrove was part of the 60s Scoop, taken from his family in 1971, a past he has reconnected with. CTV's Christian Ajikude reports.
My first memories were of a big room with a lot of kids. That's my first memory.
48-year-old Wayne William Snellgrove is slowly reconnecting with his Fishing Lake First Nation family after being away for almost his entire life.
I was taken day one right from Wadena Hospital.
Snellgrove was taken as a newborn baby in 1971 during what is now known as the 60s Scoop. Between the late 1950s and the 1980s, up to 20,000 Indigenous children were taken from their home and adopted to white families. In Saskatchewan, it was called the Adopt Indian Métis program. While most stayed in Canada, others were sent to the United States and Western Europe.
My mother was healthy. It was just part of the 60s Scoop, part of the genocide.
At 2.5 years old, Snellgrove was adopted by a family in Pennsylvania. He would grow up in multiple northeastern states, later becoming the first Indigenous person to be on a U.S. national swim team and win a national championship in the mid-1990s. Swimming was his escape. While he was looked after, Snellgrove felt there was always something missing.
There was nothing that they did was wrong. They wanted to love a little boy. But the problem is that little boy didn't love himself.
When his adopted mother passed away in 1997, he realized he was not only grieving for her, but also grieving for his biological mother. He later found his real family in 2003.
I hopped on a plane and went and met my mom for the first time in Regina Airport, and I told her I loved her for the first time at 32 years old.
It was just the most amazing thing that ever happened, to have that closure and having him on our arms again, and just to catch up on our lives.
Today, Snellgrove helps others through ceremony. His message to other 60 Scoop survivors is to forgive. Chris Nachkate, CTV News, Regina.
A family in Innisfail, Alberta says they feel discriminated against after a 20-year-old bylaw was used to force them to take down a soft-sided garage they use for prayer. The problem is there are plenty of other homes in the area that have the same soft-sided structure, and they say they're being singled out. Here's CTV's Bill McFarlane.
Mary Volker has lived in this Innisfail house since 1974. She's never forgotten the traditions passed on by her father.
And so I've tried to hang on to a little bit of my heritage, and so that's what I do with the tent.
Along with her daughter Lisa and other family members, the two tents on the large residential property are used as gathering places.
We go in there, you know, in summertime about once or twice a week, and we pray.
But in August, a bylaw officer stopped by. There was a complaint. The town says soft-sided structures can only be kept up for a week, so after 4 years of use, the tents would have to go. The family appealed, but last week Innisfail Council voted to uphold bylaw number 1470-A61, giving the Volkers until October 31st to take them down.
And I think they were very unjust.
Bylaws are bylaws, but she may have a point. You don't have to look far to find others.
So I started looking around town, and there's over 30 of them. Started taking pictures, building a bit of a case.
The family says it's been told the other structures will eventually be taken down as well. Everyone must follow the same rules. But given a lifetime here and the purpose of the portable shelters, the Volkers can't shake a feeling of injustice.
They had said that they've had ordered 2 other people to remove theirs this July, and we are the 3rd one. And that they're going to work real hard to try and get everybody else to get theirs down as well.
No one from the town of Innisfail was available to comment. Bill McFarlane, CTV News, Innisfail.
That's your news for this Monday. Stick around next for APTN's pre-debate show. We'll discuss what the past 4 years has meant to Indigenous people and what to expect as the 6 main party leaders get set to fight it out tonight. We'll then air that debate live from Gatineau, Quebec. And after, we'll be back here to dissect how it all went. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Stay tuned here for APTN Vote 2019.